Hey, this is Curious. I want to talk about adaptability. I'm continuing the subject from something that was brought up on the Breakfast Club. And it's like, well, when I think of adaptability, especially human adaptability, what it seems like what we're talking about is survival strategy. And when you talk about survival strategy of human beings, you're ultimately talking about sentient life. And when you talk about sentient life and behavior, well, it makes me wonder the root question that seems to go back friggin' whether you're talking about race or sex or life or society and all the things that we do to propagate ourselves. Because it seems like to propagate yourself is the point of nature, not necessarily to propagate the best to the individual, but to continue on the best survival, not to a higher degree, like, humans are better than chimps, and chimps are better than friggin' dogs, and dogs are better than friggin'... I won't say it. Racist! Oh no, I'm joking. Put your friggin' expletive in there, what you want. I'd rather have my dog than that motherfucker. Back to reality. Or not reality. Whatever you consider reality. The point is that you'll have life adapting not to the goal of the individual, and strangely, not even to the goal of the best possible outcome of the species, but to its adaptation to its environment. So it always made me wonder, of all the other animals, what the hell is wrong with human beings? Why are we sentient? Now, if you kind of suspect that race has something to do with behavior, which I think it does, but I also think that unlike strict determinists and, supremacists, that there's no fixed point of reference. Things are the way they are. Well, like the book Gun, Germs, and Steel, Jared Diamond has gone on to say that the only reason that the West is so far beyond the East and other places in the world, like Africa and Latin America and stuff, is because we had domestic animals and domestic crops. And since we spread upon a longitudinal line, those things could stay basically the same. See, because when you go to different regions, animals and plants adapt differently. Like Dutch settlers in Africa were just like the American Indians. They were just falling over dead because they were in the wrong temperate zone, or not temperate, but just the wrong regional zone, climate zone, which is like the altitude, not attitude and altitude. I mean, like the up and down, the side to side. Okay, those terms, and for the globe, and longitude and latitude. I think that's it. Anyway, when you're at a certain latitude, depending on the geography, you're generally going to be able to extend your type of living across. And that's what you have from the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East until everyone farmed it out of existence because it had a very thin topsoil over the sand, to all across Europe. Now, it makes me wonder how that worked with sentience, because with like cooked food and fire and stable abundance of calories, not only could you have more specified people doing specified tasks, and that means better nutrition and more technology, better health, in some degree makes better intelligence. Although, not so much, because if you're not actually pursuing something, then you're just kind of a herbivore, and you're just kind of, just grazing. Like a friggin', what do you call them? Vegetarian. Vegans, if you ever notice, aren't that smart. And so, what it must have happened earlier is, I think, and although I could be wrong on the science, is all these hominids got together and mixed somehow, and that made human beings. But all human beings aren't homogeneous, because we probably a mixture of 3 or 4 different hominid types. I mean, we're all pretty much the same species, but I don't buy that we're all the same species. And this doesn't necessarily go about modern race types or ethnicities, and especially nationalities. Because if you look back on something, there was a lot of things where people just informally adapted something else. This woman married this man, and things must have just got dropped on the side. She's a fourth Polish, or she's a 8th American Indian, or her grandfather was friggin' half Hispanic, and it just, by looks, it just dwindled down and things got discarded. I mean, we have modern genetic tests now, but the problem with everything, and although you can't say this about everything, but everything is not always a conspiracy theory, but everything we see is a subjective value to a point. I mean, science is science, but where there can be possibility of interpretation, you can't rely on things being objective without serious consideration. Now, when it goes against my political leanings, I mean, no, it's all objective, that subjective shit is bullshit, screw that liberal shit. And I kind of feel that way, for real. But, on the other hand, cognitive dissonance can also apply to even things that I do agree with, progressive or conservative. Like, science. Like those 23andMe genetic tests. No. There's too much possibility of political bias in that. Or cultural bias. There's reasons people might want to have people be less white. And what this all gets around to is, how do you judge really what's detrimental? what is a bad adaptation, because there's an adaptation to the self, there's your adaptation to your society, and there's an adaptation to yourself as a species just to propagate. There's like 3 or 4 different objectives to considering the aspect of adaptation. And it's like, and once you start breaking that down, you start breaking it down into individualism. I mean, when you can go from sociology straight into reduction, alteration of thought, right into individual psychology. Like, if we sit there and run a 10,000 question test or a 1,000,000 question test on every individual and then have a supercomputer that could correlate it all, but then again, who would do the frigging measuring, the parameters for the measurements to correlate all that? See, that's the point. And it's like, so how can you really know what's a bad adaptation? Because we'll never actually be able to pretty much agree, or at least at this time, of what a center point of that adaptation is. So when I hear about adaptation and that, I'm thinking of a whole parameter of factors and signifiers of what could actually be involved in that consideration. Sociological, psychological, cultural, political. I mean, that's why I have trouble sometimes, because I'll go ahead and I'll start talking about something, and I kind of realize I don't know all that much about the subjects, but what I do kind of know generally, kind of like, well, how are you supposed to have any opinion when all these different things and everything is so interrelated? Isn't everything just a subjective point? And if you're going to be subjective about adaptation, then how are you supposed to make a concisive determination about subjective adaptation? Think about that one. I can't even say that twice. Alright. You tell me, people. Thank you. Bye.